prestige and this thing to introduce Mr. Shrikant Modak ji, who has been a senior financial journalist with the 30 years of experience in senior editorial position in country's leading financial newspaper and magazines. His early career was in academics, where he was on faculty of the Institute of Rural Management, Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, Mumbai University, and Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Researches. He has over 30 years of consulting experience in field of energy economics and has written extensively on the subject in news media and academic journals. He has co-authored 5 books in which 4 of them has been in field of energy economics. He holds a master's degree in economics from London School of Economics. So we have these 2 great personalities with us on board. One is Mr. Shrikant Modak, and now coming to Sangeeta Bahadur ma'am. So a brief introduction about her. So Sangeeta Bahadur ma'am joined the Indian Foreign Services in 1987. During her 35 years of its career, she served India in various capacities, both at home and abroad. Starting with Spain, she was posted over the year in Bulgaria, Mexico, Belgium, UK, and ambassador to Belarus. She retired last year as High Commissioner to Malta. At headquarters, she handled responsibilities across the board, including as Deputy Director General, India Council for Cultural Relations, and resident faculty at the Sushma Swaraj Institute of Foreign Services, New Delhi. She also completed the 11th month course, National Security, conducted by the National Defense College in Delhi. During her long and distinguished career, she acquired substantial experience in public administration, strategy planning, media management, negotiation, and narrative building. She has also published and much loved author of the heroic fantasy series Kal, which is a new thing for me, as information for me, which is unique in weaving concepts from Indian spiritual traditions and philosophy into the amazing journey of the original Indian superheroes avatars. Her next standalone book, a historical fantasy, is expected to be out soon. All the best for that. She's a fluent Spanish speaker, a good orator who has regularly been invited to speak at universities and other organizations, and is gifted with amateur singer, which I also happen to hear her fabulous voice.
Thank you.
Who has often lent her voice for cultural events in India and abroad. She was in 2022 global finalist under the UN. She is
She inspires
annual awards in 2 categories. She holds a prominent position in international organization G100 that brings together high-profile women achievers in diverse fields. She is the president of Zen Next Foundation and an active member of Zena Word family, and is closely associated with many of its initiatives and activities. She is now committing her time and experience to guest lectures in foreign policies, international relations, doing business abroad, cultural diplomacy, etc., and mentioning programs at various universities around the country. She is also strategic advisor to several organizations, introducing FICCI and IIM Raipur on matters of international business and foreign collaboration. She is now registered as a qualified independent director with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Sorry. Yeah. So over to you guys, both of you. So
I think we will begin with some, some opening remarks, as you were saying, the history of and the, strategic uh, geopolitics of the region. I would invite Mr. Modak to go ahead first. And the only thing I can say is that I was posted as ambassador to Belarus in the recent past. So I have been sort of a ringside witness to what's been happening, but it'll be very interesting if you could start and open, the conversation on this.
Thanks, Sangeeta ji and Seema ji and Rajiv. I'll give you a brief history of how the geography came into, became an important tool of geostrategic understanding of the world and geopolitical understanding of the world, actually. Now, in 1904, the first person to bring geography in the forefront of geopolitics was Halford Mackinder. He put forth a thesis defining the whole globe into different areas of geostrategic importance, actually. And he gave a complete geopolitical analysis. His basic thesis was that historically the struggle between the nations, between the powers, world powers, has been between the maritime powers and those on the land, actually. And in the present context, in the context of the 20th century, the likelihood of the land powers to succeed was much higher. And this theory hypothesis is known as heartland hypothesis, in which the major areas are defined, and to maintain one's hegemony, that one has to have control over them. Now, this was in 1904. Subsequently, there were several other writers who came forth and gave their variations of this particular theory. But the latest one was in 1997, when Brzezinski, he was National Security Advisor under Carter, and subsequently, after the Carter presidency, he moved into academics, and he was with Harvard and various other institutions, academic institutions of repute. In 1997, he published a book called Grand Chessboard. Grand Chessboard, American Primacy and its Geostrategic Imperatives. He evaluated the various possible candidates who could challenge the primacy of US. And then he came to a conclusion that strategically the most important place was Eurasia, and the power of the superpower which rules this, which has a control over Eurasia, will be the dominant, will be the hegemonic power for a future to come. Now, this was the major challenge he saw. The major challenge he saw was from a number of countries he listed, but the most important was Russia. And he came to a conclusion that it was important, either to subdue Russia, or if it does not come into line, then take it on. And his thesis was to weaken the Russia, it was necessary to break it up into a number of republics. Okay, so this is the now geostrategic and geopolitics is basically associated with geoeconomics. Why Eurasia is important is because of its Eurasia, actually, which extends from East Europe right and goes right up to the Pacific and most of Asia. Now, according to latest studies which are available, the next century belongs to the Eurasia. These are the areas, these are the areas where happening areas actually in terms of economics, in terms of the young population, and the growing economies. And it was necessary to control these areas if America is to maintain its America-led West has to maintain its hegemony actually. And what was Brzezinski's proposition was that to weaken Russia, which was a dominant power, it was essential to break it up into smaller republics, which can be controlled by the US-led West. And so that's the broad overview under which a lot of things that have happened the last, you can say, 30 years. In recent times, after Brzezinski, there was a Wolfowitz doctrine for maintaining the hegemony of American hegemony over the rest of the world. And then the more recently, there was the US came out with national security strategy to take on the competition, actually emerging competition from various, in which Russia and China are the two main countries. And then there is a congressional report that is the that is about the great power competition and implication for defense. So these are the strategic documents which have developed over the course of time, and that these are the things which are driving, which have been driving for the last 30 odd years, but more particularly in the last 2 decades, actually. It all started with the breaking up of Yugoslavia, and then subsequently Iraq War #2. And then there have been a succession of wars, which apparently on the surface, it may seem that these were the pretext to invade them was human rights, but there was there was a much deeper strategy involved. For example, in case of Libya, it was terrorism and violation of human rights. But the real reason was because Gaddafi was proposing to form African Union, and he was proposing to have a African currency for trade. Now this was seen as a challenge by the West. Okay, and Again, the Iraq war itself was seen as a challenge because although again here the human rights were uh, human rights issues uh, were highlighted by the Western media and the Western leaderships. But there again, Saddam Hussein had wanted to break the tradition which had begun in 1970 of conducting all oil trade in dollars. And he proposed that he wanted to start doing trading in other currencies, particularly euro. So that was one of the reasons why, one of the major reasons why. So that was seen as a threat to economic dominance of US. And now Russia, in fact, is a very long history, you see. It begins in even before 19th century, but particularly in the 19th century and then in the 20th century. Russia has seen many wars, and this is not surprising because Russia is a very vast country. It has very vast resources. It is a commodity giant. Okay, it is if you see, there are many important commodities, including oil. It ranks in the top 5 or 10. In many cases, in case of rare earth metals and other things, actually is second or third. In case of for digital technology, one of the a very important gas called neon gas. Now, Russia and Ukraine, they are the top 2 suppliers of that. They control that market. So this is the economic background of Russia, okay, and the so for centuries the West has had its eye on Russia, but more particularly in recent years. So this is the background against which one has to see the present war. Now, after the Soviet Union broke up, there about 15 republics separated out. One of them was Ukraine. But before that, you know, during Gorbachev's time, they had taken they had held a referendum whether to continue with the Soviet system or I mean, in all the republics, they had conducted a referendum asking whether they would like to continue with the Soviet system or break up. There were only 5 countries actually, 5 republics who wanted to separate out, and all of them were in the Central Asia. Ukraine was not one of them. But when the Gorbachev was overthrown, he was kidnapped and later on actually sidelined. The Ukraine and there are several other republics felt that Soviet Union was not a stable arrangement. So there are other 10 republics separated out. Okay. Now, after this weakening, there has been continuous effort to prevent Russia from gathering itself and you know, getting on with its development. So this is the broad historical background. Now, coming to the present, coming to the more recent, actually, which is the recent the developments in the last 2 decades, which has led to the present conflict in Ukraine. If you see the chronology of that, It starts with 2008. In 2008, Russian President Vladimir Putin, in a NATO meeting in April of 2008, he had he had he had first of all, he had objected to America putting its missile systems close to Russia. Secondly, he had said that he had asked for a security arrangement such that NATO or any NATO or any other country actually should not have a security arrangement which is detrimental to the any other country, including Russia. Okay. But that didn't go very well, and that was the beginning of the conflict between the West and Russia. One of the offshoot of that, which has been usual practice with the Western powers, is to start demonizing the leader of the adversary countries. That was the case with many of the color revolutions and the countries which US invaded in the last 2 decades. And now, and that process started also of demonizing Putin in 2000, from 2008, because he was not the person who was falling in line. The impression that has been created because they have a control over the global media. And that is a very important tool to influence the thinking of the people. And since they have a control over the global media, the impression which has been created is that Putin has an imperial design, of restoring the old glory of what the Russia was before the Soviet Union fell. Now, all that is fine, actually, but if you see, there are only 2 places Russia has invaded in the last 20 years. That is, one is Georgia and Ukraine. Now, in case of Georgia, there was a disputed territory actually, and again in Georgia too was a geostrategically important country for US, and US involvement was very strong there actually, just as strong as it was in case of Chechnya. Chechnya was again there was a very it was Islamic Islamic insurgency which was instigated by the Americans in the same way as they had done in case of Afghanistan. Now, all this, one more thing which I would like to highlight is that number of bases surrounding Russia. There are nine bases surrounding Russia actually, either in immediate neighborhood or in proximity of Russia, like Turkey. Then in case of Bulgaria, they have a base. In Estonia, they have a base. In Poland, they have a base. In Germany, they have a base. In Netherlands, they have a base. Belgium, they have a base. in some of these bases, they even have the nuclear arsenal. In contrast, if you see, Russia does not have any base close to America. But America has base even in the Pacific, in Alaska, and on an island which is about 500 miles from Russia, the Pacific side of the Russia, actually. Now, this is so in a way, you can say that Russia has been encircled, geostrategically encircled, and the design of the Western powers, who are associated, has been to how to take control over Russia. And this has been going on, actually. Now, in context of that, in 1914, what is known as a Maidan coup was instigated by Russia, so by US, against Russia in Ukraine. This was the chief architect of that was Victoria Nuland, who is now a deputy NSA, that is National Security Advisor of the US government. And that was the beginning. The Ukraine government, that was that time the president was Viktor Yanukovych, who was trying to balance both sides, actually, and but he was under tremendous pressure, and under pressure he had agreed to hold a referendum to decide whether whether Ukraine should join the EU and NATO or not, actually. So even before the referendum could take place, this Maidan coup was initiated, and you see, Ukraine has a very large population, Russian-speaking population. And then there's a Ukrainian-speaking population, actually. So Ukrainian-speaking population is the dominant and is dominant, and they are mainly in they are in control of the government. Especially, there is a fascist wing in that, known as Banderites. And they have a tremendous, although in terms of percentage, they constitute only 2 or 3%, but they have wielded a tremendous power over the politics of Ukraine. And as far as the Russian-speaking part was concerned, they were not very keen on joining EU. But the Western part was very keen, and especially the oligarchs. Their interests were associated with the with the Americans and the Europeans, and there was a kind of split, ethnic split in the country, and the Western Ukrainians, they attacked in 2014 after the Maidan coup. They attacked what is known as Donbass, eastern part of Ukraine, and that is when the Russians came in, and they tried to help the Donbass militia to stand up against the Western Ukraine, government forces. And that is how the separation took place. And in the process, Russians also took Crimea, which always was a part of Russia, except for that brief period after the Soviet Union fell. So that has been the bone of contention between the West and the US and the Russia. Now, in the meantime, from 2014 until this present war started, there were attempts to peacefully settle, to bring peace. And this one of the successful attempts was is known as Minsk agreement, Minsk II agreement. Now this agreement was brokered by Germany and France. And according to this, the Ukraine was to become a federal state with Russian-speaking republics and the Western Ukraine. That is the Ukraine ethnic Ukrainians. But this Minsk Accord was never, and this was registered in United Nations also and passed to the National Security Council. So it had the backing of the United Nations and the Western powers, but that was only on surface. The accord, Ukraine never honored it, and they used the interim period. The Americans used the interim period to prepare to train the Ukrainian army to fight a war. And then in 2022, when things came to 2021, sorry, things became very difficult. So that time, Russia sent a draft treaty plan to US and NATO. And draft setting out the conditions for peaceful
Dada, humble request. Can you open up the session into a conversation mode?
Yeah, but this is I'm just finishing. So this is the background. Russia then sent a draft treaty for negotiation, setting out its red lines. But these red lines were not honored, but have not been honored, and then ultimately it ended up in the special military operation, Russia's special military operation in Ukraine. Okay, and its eventual breakup. So this is the stage at which this whole conflict stands. Now, nearly 1.5 years has gone, and a lot of things have happened. Many things which we see are not what they seem, how they are being reported in Western media, actually. And the factual situation is quite different. Okay, so this is where I have completed. Now here we can have some questions, which I would like to answer. Actually, I can answer. Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, thank you for that history lesson and telling us about what the conflict is all about and what went behind it. Since I was not posted in Ukraine, but since I was ambassador to Belarus, I did learn a few things about this whole conflict and what went into it, and also the fact that Russia and Ukraine share a very long history. And at one stage, I think in the early 1900s, around 1830, 1840, from what I remember, the Tsarist Russia had also annexed Ukraine and had become a part of the Russian Empire at that time. And the Ukrainians, as you said, were not probably very happy about it, but they couldn't do anything much. And the situation went on. And there have been a lot of instances where the Ukrainians have rebelled and they've gotten out of the bear hug with Russia. Then they've gotten back in. Then, they've had presidents who have been very pro-Russia. So at that time, they moved away from the EU. They moved away from the West. Then they've had very, anti-Russia presidents, and, things went to the other side. And the Russians have also sort of, dealt with them, dealt different hands to them, because depending on the situation, what was happening, sometimes they would be very, very lavish in their affection for their, they consider the Ukrainians to be part of their own cultural diaspora very much. They followed the same church. The Russian Orthodox Church was also the Ukrainian church. Recently, the two have broken up and they've gone their separate ways. But so at one stage, Nikita Khrushchev, as we know, handed over Crimea to Ukraine, and there was a lot of resentment in Russia because of that. And then there's this whole issue of the eastern part of Ukraine, which is, as you were saying, it has a large majority of Russians, etc. It's of course the economic factor is very much there. It's always a part of any conflict, any bilateral or global conflict that happens. America has attacked so many countries for economic interests, or to preserve its economic power, is the value of the dollar, etc., etc. So they've done it very often. There is also a lot of bittersweet kind of relationship between the two countries. Like, for example, even the Maidan and all that had happened before I joined Minsk as India's ambassador. But even after that, since it was so close, I would go to Kiev quite often. A beautiful city, beautiful, absolutely amazing, stunning architecture and everything. I used to go there, and you could make out people they knew Russian, but they would not speak to you in Russian. They had this kind of, very, sometimes very aggressive feelings towards Russia. For example, I remember going to one of those, curio shops where you pick up gifts and things for people. And I actually found rolls of toilet paper with Putin's face on it. And I was like, what are you trying to do? That was, I mean, as bad as it could get, and then the whole thing escalated. And now we have this whole situation with the war. What I'd like to ask you, perhaps your analysis of the whole thing, because I remember that when the war broke out, I think in February last year, right? And I was in Malta at that time, posted as High Commissioner. And there was a lot of outrage from my fellow EU ambassadors, and everybody was like, what the hell is Russia doing? And why isn't India speaking up, etc.? That's a different story again. But essentially, everybody's evaluation at that time was that this war cannot last beyond a month or two, because obviously for the obvious differences between the Russian resources, capabilities, size, and the Ukrainian, aspects of it. So the idea was that, okay, they'll fight a quick war and then obviously Russia will triumph. That did not, however, happen, because, the West has been supporting, providing them with arms and ammunition, a lot of money, which a lot of people are now saying is going into Zelensky's pocket rather than into the war effort. And at the same time, what amazed me was the fact, as I was just saying, Kiev is a was a beautiful city, and now it's been leveled to the ground. So I thought it was very stupid of the Ukrainians to fight a war like this on their own territory. You want to destroy land, destroy the enemies, right? If you're letting the enemy come into your land and fight the war with you, destroying everything that you have, I thought it was a very stupid, decision to take. Of course, there are matters of emotional, we are Ukrainians and we want independence and all that. That's different. But the fact is that you're ruining nobody but yourself. And as of now, I see Ukraine. I think it's going to be very, very difficult for them to recover from this whole thing. The kind of devastation that has been, brought upon them by this war, the way the country has been totally bombed out, right? I mean, there's virtually no buildings left standing. People are in the roads dying. There's famine and hunger and everything. And the West does not want this to stop. At least it did not want it to stop until very, very recently, because obviously the US defense industry was minting money out of this whole effort. And so were probably many of the EU countries' defense industries. I was just seeing, watching a news item today in which they were saying that, my former host country's president, Lukashenko, who's like a teddy bear with an iron heart. Okay, I mean, that is what the impression he gives me. He has apparently just today or yesterday issued the warning that if Ukraine does not come to an understanding and a ceasefire with Russia, it is going to be completely destroyed. Already, Russia is in possession of a huge, I think, more than 1 lakh square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. And Lukashenko's argument was that if the war is not stopped now, Russia will simply take over all of Ukraine. Now it seems that even the Western countries are really, not very sure of how much further they should go to support Ukraine in this whole war effort, because they probably realize that Russia is, a country that could defeat Napoleon and could defeat Nazi Germany. And so Ukraine is just, small change for them. So they probably realize that it's not as easy as they thought. And they're investing a lot of money into, a losing game, so to say. So what do you think? Is there, and India has definitely, Mr. Modi has been trying to tell both the countries to stop, because this is not an era for war. Come to the table, talk things out. Do you think finally some sort of, a good sense is going to prevail with Ukraine? Because I'm absolutely certain that President Putin is not going to back out. It's become a matter of honor for Russia. It's become a matter of saving prestige, their face. So they will not back out. And it's Ukraine which is suffering hugely because of this war. So do you think that now at this stage, when the entire territory is threatened, at least according to Lukashenko, and he would not have said this if he had not been told by the Russians to go ahead and make this announcement. So do you think at some stage any sort of sense is going to prevail? Or will he just, go on because he's filling his bank account with all the money that is coming in?
You see, it's not for Russia. It's not really a question of honor. It's an existential. It's a question of Russia's existence.
Absolutely, because they can't afford a NATO country on their border like this.
Because
right?
They can't afford to have NATO countries on its border.
Yeah,
and they know that what is a grand scheme behind this whole thing, actually, you see. Because Ukraine is just a pawn in the hands of, the war is more or less conducted with the whole planning and, all the strategic direction, even the intelligence, actually, you see. And uh, American satellites, they provide all the necessary intelligence and all. So everything is done by the whole grand scheme of the war has been prepared by and directed by the by the Americans. If you remember, just a couple of months back, one of the commanding centers was attacked by Russians, in which more than 300, people died. In that, 40 to 50 American, American high-level officials were there, actually.
Yeah.
And Americans as well as Europeans, So this war, the Ukraine is just a puppet in the hands of all the strings are with the Americans and the NATO, actually, you see. NATO means America only, actually, you see. So it's an existential war as far as Russia is concerned. The whole Ukrainian army defense has been trained in the West, and particularly US. So what Russia is fighting is not Ukraine. It is fighting the
Western Alliance. Very true.
It is fighting the Western Alliance.
Yeah, yeah.
And the fact is that it has gone on for so long is because it is fighting a well-trained Ukrainian army, actually. Again, if you see as far as the balance of what has happened, balance has been largely in favor of Russia. Ukraine has lost something like 350,000 dead and put out of action, actually, you see. In comparison, Russia has lost about casualties have been around 50,000. So this is the ratio.
Yep.
Again, the artillery, this is artillery war, you see. And the Russia has an overwhelming advantage. But at the same time, the reason why it has gone on for so long is because the planning was there. Planning had gone on for very long, from 2014 onwards. And Ukraine had built up lots of fortifications, trenches and all sorts of things, actually. And trench warfare is very difficult. It's
very sort of Second World War. Who fights in trenches anymore?
First World War. Mainly First World War.
Yeah.
So that that is very difficult, actually, you see. But now I don't think it is going to last very long. War itself will last very long. And as far as the Americans and the West, the kind of proposals they are putting are very silly proposals. I don't think Russia is going to accept them. They are very. I mean, those proposals don't have any. I mean, Russians are not foolish to accept those kinds. For example, they're talking about armistice.
Yeah.
I mean, after what they have seen from 2014 to 2022, what has happened, actually, how Ukrainian army has been prepared.
Yeah.
You think Russians are going to, enter into armistice?
No, absolutely no. And the West, I think, is now even hitting below the belt. For example, this recent thing they've done about taking out a warrant against President Putin from the International Court of Justice, which is ridiculous. So they are just, from what I can see, despite whatever is happening to their economies because of this war, because as you're aware, America is probably not as badly affected, but Europe is. It's very badly affected. Food exports have been, like not coming in from Russia. Petroleum prices are going up. All over Europe, there's massive inflation, massive non-unemployment, and all kinds of the economies are falling to pieces because of this war to a large extent. There are other factors as well, but this war has also played a major role. But despite that, sincere efforts are missing. I mean, nobody seems to really want this war to stop. If it goes on for a little more, okay, America is benefiting. I don't know what European Union is getting out of it, but they are also not really putting their foot down. And their people have been so brainwashed against, in favor of Ukraine and against Russia, that they are unable to find any kind of balance between the two. And that is the reason why, as you were saying, maybe the war will not last long, but it will not come to a stop straight away either. And then, efforts like this to arrest Putin and all that, it's just like, कहते ना आग में घी डालने का काम. It's something like that. That's what I would say. So they are doing it, and probably at one stage, India had a good chance of, being an intermediary between the two. But again, I don't know if we let it go, or we didn't push hard enough, or we didn't our feeling has always been one, that Russia is not totally in the wrong, nor is Ukraine. But Russia has been a long-standing and a very valued friend of ours. And secondly, Ukraine has never been, has in international organizations, the UN and all that. It has never really stood by us, because if you would remember, Ukraine is very much a member of that so-called coffee club, which also includes Pakistan and Turkey and all these places, who are the ones who created the major ruckus about India not being allowed to join the Security Council. Whenever there's a question of, India voting for India against Pakistan or China, whatever, Ukraine has never been in our favor. Although I must say that whenever I went, among the people in Ukraine, there's a lot of goodwill for India. Although even that is now breaking up. I've been hearing reports of, our students being harassed, a lot of racism being displayed, Indian students being told to go home, you don't belong here because your country is not supporting us, and all kinds of things. So I don't know if we have now lost the momentum. There were high hopes at one stage, at least here in the media here, that we could play the peacemakers. But do you think we still have any role to play, or we have just decided, or we should decide to just let the game play itself out, and just take a chance with whatever is happening?
Well, the best chance for peace was in March 22, where in Turkey, they thrashed out a draft agreement, and both sides, it was signed by both sides actually, and the negotiations were about to, the final negotiations were about to start. And Zelensky's meeting with Putin was being organized actually. It had come to that close. And it was Britain, from this Johnson actually, the Prime Minister of Britain, British Prime Minister, he went and he carried a message from US, asking Zelensky that he would not get any help from if he signed the peace agreement. So that was the best chance. And after that, actually, a lot of water has flown into Dawn since then. And I don't think Russia is going to agree to anything less than what it has set out for itself.
Yeah.
Its main main aim is to denazify. What it says, denazify Ukraine. Actually, you see the influence of the Banderites, and demilitarize,
Demilitarize, yeah.
and
And not let them join the EU or NATO. That's
that's
also
right. It can, like the Central Asian country, the countries who who separated out from Soviet Union. They have not been, they have not had any problem as such actually. But Russia certainly doesn't want any any uh, uh, any the Western military deployments in its proximity. So any country which tries to do that, Russia is not going to spare them. It did it. It didn't spare. It came down heavily on. It's like, during the Cuban crisis, the Americans came down very heavily on the Russians actually.
Yeah, exactly.
The missile crisis.
In
So
those
it
days,
is,
now they want to do the same thing to Russia and expect Russia not to react.
not to react actually, you see. And
So it's
and
very
the
fair.
the interesting thing is that, America thinks that the whole world belongs to it actually,
Yeah.
and its security is tied up with the whole world.
Hmm.
It has got 900 bases. You tell me which country has,
And why? I mean, nobody is asking them to come and help out
that's
anywhere.
right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So
so
it's
I don't think Russia is going to back out. This is going to ultimately, it will lead to collapse of the Ukrainian army,
yeah,
and it will end with that.
and a complete devastation of Ukraine.
And
It's
complete
already,
devastation of Western Ukraine will be completely finished. Actually, you see,
yeah. It's
because
complete.
Russia will rebuild the parts, the
Crimea and all that,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
eastern part, That's true.
Donbass it
Yeah,
will rebuild,
Russia-
but what about the Western part? Western part
What
is
about the
finished.
Western part? Who's going to
Mhm.
invest all that money? That's very true.
That's
And
right.
Russia, I think, unlike Ukraine, has found ways around, the economic devastation that's hit the region, because despite whatever the Americans try to do, impose, trade sanctions, etc., stop them from exporting oil, but they've found ways around it. They're exporting to us, for example, and we are sort of refining them and then selling it off to. So India has become the biggest exporter of refined oil in the process. So they have been clever enough, and they probably are big enough and resourceful enough to actually find a way around the sanctions, find a way around all the difficulties that they are facing. But Ukraine is not, and they have been very foolishly dependent on the Western alliance for all this. And they have just, those guys have just, like, yeah, go ahead, we are with you. Tum suli chad jao, hum tumhare saath hain, that kind of a thing. But ultimately, I think it's Ukraine who's suffering the most. And I sometimes feel this is all the result of electing a comedian to be your president. Maybe it's not a politically correct thing to say, but he doesn't seem to have much political sense, and he's a
No.
very corruptible man. So yeah, I guess it's.
Well, the Western expectation was that the Russian economy will collapse because of sanctions, and then the war will be over, and they will be able to subdue Russia actually. But
That's right.
In August last year, 2022, I went on a holiday to Russia. Spent 20 days traveling in Trans-Siberian, railway and all that actually, you see. And there were no shortages at all actually. See, everything was normal. And I understand that things are as normal as they have been.
Absolutely.
You see,
Absolutely. So the only
Russia.
country suffering is Ukraine.
So what has happened is that this whole idea that Russia is a gas station with a country, gas station, and nothing more than that actually. with a country attached to it, actually.
That's not true at all.
That speaks of the hubris
Absolutely.
of the
Americans.
Western Alliance, actually.
Yes, and the Western Alliance.
They grossly underestimated the capability of the Russian economy, actually.
Yeah, yeah. And Russian economy is not probably as glamorous and fancy as that of the Western countries, but it's very solid. Like, just to, give you a small and very personal example, I was also posted in Bulgaria at one stage, much earlier in my career. And they had just, of course, the Soviet Union had broken up and everything. Not that they were ever a part of the Union, but they were very much within the Iron Curtain. So when I was posted there, that was the time of transition when everything was changing. And, to the extent, and they hated the Russians also, just like the Ukrainians do. And at that stage, till then, Russian was supposed to be their official language, right? I mean, Bulgarian is a very separate, distinct language, but Russian was imposed as the official language and everybody spoke Russian. But at that stage, the hatred had gone to such an extent that they started calling themselves a Francophone country. Now, I didn't hear a single person in Bulgaria speaking French, but they call themselves a Francophone country. But, there, like, it snows a lot. It's very cold 6 months in the year. It's covered under snow and all that. And we discovered that there is this, like you can buy the most fancy American cars there with snow tires and whatnot and all that. But it doesn't work. You buy a Russian car, which we did finally, and without snow tires, whatever, it just goes anywhere, any inclination, any weather. It's like, so Russian industry and Russian technology is like that, it's very solid, very functional. So the West, when they look at Russia and they look down on them, actually saying, oh, these are the bullock cart wallas compared to our Mercedes. But the fact of the matter is the bullock cart can keep going when your Mercedes breaks down. And that is where they underestimate, as you very rightly said.
That's right, actually. See, one thing they didn't realize is that Russia has may not be as sophisticated. They may not have an industry as sophisticated as Western Alliance, but they have a solid, And even if you see the industrial power of Russia comes out in this war itself, actually, you see. In spite of the industrial complex, military industrial complex of the America, actually, you see, they are running short of weapons, actually, for supply to Ukraine, actually.
Yeah.
But Russian production of weapons is going at a great, so they can go on fighting as long as they want, actually, you see.
Yeah, they can go on.
But the situation in the Western Alliance has come to a point where to replenish the stocks which they have lost, actually, in Ukraine will take 6 to 7 years.
Easily.
Because what happened is, the whole military industrial complex, which is in the private hands, they were maximizing their profit by through third-party manufacturing.
Yeah.
That is poking out to different parts of the world. Now, putting that network. That network is all right to maximize their profits, but it's not a solid network to build up your security, you see.
Yeah.
Which is not the case which is not the case with Russia. Russia has always maintained its control over its military production, actually. See.
True, absolutely. So from what you are saying and from what I can also see, the Western countries and America, they were screaming Third World War, for a long time, ever since the conflict started. I don't think there is any chance of that happening. And besides, as our EM, Mr. Jaishankar, said at some press conference, he said that, just because it's happening in Europe, finally, you think it should concern the entire world, but what happens in the rest of the world does not concern you. So, just because these two countries are European, so there's all the song and dance being made. There have been far worse conflicts that have happened in the rest of the world, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. They don't seem to care because, like people who are not European can live or die for all they care. So I personally do not think that this has any fears of escalating into a third world war. And as you were also saying, the Western, initiative in this whole war is winding down finally. And I'm hoping, although I was very wrong when the war started, and I thought month and a half at most, and now it's gone on for a year and a half. But so we could be wrong, but it looks as though this may not probably last much beyond the end of this year. Do you agree?
Well, maximum, I think, maximum, I would say, is summer of next year, 2024.
Oh, you think it might go on for another year?
Maximum, the upper limit, I believe, actually. But I think the collapse may come much earlier, actually.
Much earlier, even I think so.
Because
Although,
Ukraine doesn't have well-trained well-trained that force is now all fresh recruits, actually, you see, who have not been trained. They have lost that they have lost their well-trained soldiers.
Yeah. Now these are all fresh recruits.
And what is left is just a very superficially trained force, actually, you see.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
it takes a long time to prepare. I mean, years together to prepare a fighting force. And much of that Ukraine has lost. What it is getting is, I mean, it is mobilizing. It has mobilized so often, and now it has started mobilizing even young boys, actually, you see, and even men of 50s and very 50s and
older range,
older range, actually, you see.
Yeah, because they're desperate, I guess.
Desperate, actually, you see.
Yeah. I must mention at this stage something. A few months ago, I was having dinner with one of the EU ambassadors to India. I'll not name names because we don't want to make it. And, we just got talking about this, and he started again ranting about how India is, has refused to support the Western efforts in Ukraine, and how Russia is being so unfair and so barbaric and all that. So I basically told him that, look, essentially it's in your region. How does it concern us? We are far away, and the best we can do is, like, we can see points on both sides. I mean, Russia is also in the right, and Ukraine also in another sense. So why would we want to sort of step in, get our noses into that conflict? So so why should we? And he said something very strange. He was obviously very angry. And he said that, just remember that when China attacks you again, and the West also shrugs its shoulders and says, how do we care? We are too far away. And I told him, when has the West not done that in any case? Like, people don't seem to care about any other conflict outside of Europe itself. So, but, that kind of colonial mindset is still very much there, and no matter what they the business they're doing with India and all the other things that are happening, but deep down that feeling that these are people we used to rule at one time, and how dare they not stand up with us, that's very much there. And therefore even I feel that even if we had made a concerted effort to take a very active role in de-escalating the conflict, maybe we would not even have been, like facilitated to that extent, because they feel they have started the war, and if anybody ends it, it should be them. So I think, as you were rightly saying, until they realize that now they just do not, they're running out of resources, and they cannot sort of keep firing their gun from the shoulders of Ukraine, because now they don't have any ammunition left, basically.
That's right.
So unless that realization sets in, they will, in some form or the other, keep encouraging, keep sort of, escalating, trying to escalate the conflict, or if not escalating, at least keeping it going at some kind of a minimum pace. But maybe, as you were saying, at the most, in a year's time or so, even they ought to run out of steam. And that is the time when this conflict will start.
Well, if you see, the public opinion also has started changing in Europe. And I think more and more public is becoming aware of what is happening actually. See,
yeah.
And you can see in the number of elections, the results of the elections actually, the entrenched parties have lost out, and the political situation is not very comfortable. Even in France, actually, Macron, the hardcore support of Macron is barely 24% actually. In Germany, Germany, AfD, extreme right party actually, you see.
That's true, and that's going to happen. That's going to happen.
And similarly, also in France, Marine Le Pen, she has gained a lot of public, some support actually, you see.
Yeah. No, very soon. I think Europe has reached a point where the rise of the extreme right is looking very imminent, very imminent. And once that happens, then, of course, it's not going to happen in the next 1 year, but the trends have started. And therefore, this whole thing that is happening with Ukraine, Russia, it might just take a total backseat. And, Europeans might have other things to worry about. So, but till that happens...
May I just come in?
Yeah.
Whoever has got the technical knowledge, may respond to many people had questioned me. Russia had lot of money kept in the banks of USA.
So what's the question?
And they just seized it. They just seized it.
Who? The Americans?
Americans in West. You see, when the sanctions, when the Western Alliance sanctioned, they seized the Russian reserves. So
it comes under what law?
Sorry, it doesn't come under any law actually. In fact, they have violated the law, and that is why they are now, this de-dollarization process has begun actually in the world.
Yeah.
And India is one of the leading players in that actually, you see. And that's a
so which clearly means that no country, any other country, would deposit money. It's as simple as that.
So that is what happened, no, actually. When they saw, as long as they were doing it to smaller countries, like Libya or, Iran.
Lebanon.
So but when they saw that the Western Alliance could be so reckless as to do it to Russia, which is a power, which is a power, superpower actually.
Yeah.
So that has triggered a chain reaction actually. See, the gold, many countries have started disposing
keeping reserves in gold. Yeah.
That's right. Disposing of the American
Dollar.
This security,
Bonds.
bonds, and buying gold with that, actually, you see.
Yeah, yeah.
Then there is a dollarization process already. There was a BRICS recently. So the discussion was that in the BRICS countries should trade in their own currencies
Absolutely. And
before they can
UPI is
come to some.
already a story to look forward to, right? I mean,
That's right.
being
We are
accepted.
one of the leading players in that, actually, you see.
Yeah.
So, and for example, I'll give you India, the current dollar system is such that although India has a trade surplus with US, so actually rupee should be stronger in comparison to dollar. But because
Any day.
dollar is a trade currency of the
It's a
world.
global currency, yeah.
Yeah, so what happens is that it's all currencies actually fluctuate in relation to dollar.
Yeah.
And although India is stronger in trade, trade balance is better, but even then, actually, its currency gets depreciated whenever the dollar becomes strong, actually. You see.
That's right. Yeah.
So that is the advantage which Americans have, because they can just go on printing the dollars.
But now I believe that even the printing is now getting to be too much, and their own economy is suffering because of that. Rates of inflation are very, very high. Their national debt has become so big that they can never hope to service it. So probably this is also an avenue which will soon be closed for the US.
Yeah, it's $31 trillion, which is more than the American GDP.
GDP.
Actually.
Yeah, that's right.
And $31 trillion, and the interest rates are
Nahin,
going up. So the servicing cost is also going up.
Could have this sanction been taken unilaterally? USA did not approve of Russia attacking Ukraine. So Russia's everything on the pretext of sanction seize their every block, their every fund.
Yeah, they have reserves. They have blocked that.
Is there no international court?
It is illegal.
International Court of Justice, as you know, I just mentioned, they have issued a warrant for the arrest of Putin. So do you think they'll actually help Russia? It's all controlled by the US.
You see, the Western Alliance, especially the Americans, they have created a whole paraphernalia of global structures with which they dominate the whole global system, actually.
Yeah.
The whole financial structure is under their thumb, it is their creation, actually.
Yeah, totally.
SWIFT, the money transfer systems and everything, actually. World Bank, IMF, almost everything is under their control.
Absolutely.
So they are acting unilaterally, but then it has started rebounding in that. Even Saudi Arabia, which until now had a pact with US to trade, for OPEC to trade all its oil in dollars. That system is now breaking down.
True. So, haven't they offered to let us buy oil from them in rupees now?
We have with
Saudi Arabia,
with United Arab
UAE, yes.
we have, and we are I think you will know probably better, but with Saudi Arabia also the talks are going on, actually.
Yeah, that's what. So that may also happen. Once that happens with Russia, we're already doing it. So then I guess, the hold of the US on the world economy through the dollar is probably going to get, diluted more and more. Right. It won't happen overnight, but it's headed that way. So should we call it a day now, Rajiv Bhaiya?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
One
think it-
second. If you people have to wind up on any last calling shots of Ukraine-Russia war, and then we can call it off. Your last comments.
I feel that, as I've already said, that it was uh, basically the Western alliance firing from Ukraine's shoulder at Russia, trying to destroy their arch rival, whom I think Reagan or one of the presidents called them the evil empire, right? So that has been their strategy. But now it's probably beginning to backfire because obviously they realize that Russia is not so easy to take down, and that its inherent strengths are too much and too deep rooted for them to destroy it like some other small countries that they have done. And in the meanwhile, I feel that Ukraine is the one which has suffered the most. It has lost so many lives. It has lost so much property. Its entire country has been damaged beyond repair because, you might build new cities. Like I was, since I was posted in Belarus, and Minsk during the Second World War was completely level to the ground, level to the ground. It lost like more than half its population, and it went through really bad times. So they rebuilt from scratch. And I must say, Minsk is one of the prettiest cities I've ever been to, prettiest, cleanest, very well maintained, very, very, very nice looking place, very convenient. But it lacks history completely because there's nothing left from the original city of Minsk or most of Belarus. Same thing is now going to happen to Ukraine. It has lost its history. It's lost its tourism industry completely. Who's going to go to Ukraine anymore to see what? Devastated, cities and bomb craters. Nobody's going to go there for that. So they have, and their entire production facility, everything has been destroyed. And it will take, I don't know, at least 50 years, maybe more than that, to rebuild it to the same level that it was now, by which time the rest of the world would have moved much, much forward. So it's been a disaster for Ukraine. It's been a losing war for the West. They've just made a fool out of themselves. And at the end, I think Russia will be the one who'll have the last laugh.
To round up the discussion, actually, the one major outcome of this war, proxy war, is that the end of American hegemony has begun, actually, you see. And we are very rapidly moving into a multilateral,
Multipolar
world, and so the G7, I think, has become completely irrelevant.
Absolutely.
Irrelevant, actually. It's and even in
So all that
G20,
peaking economy is nothing much is happening there. Absolutely.
that's right. And the power balance is now shifting towards the Central Asia, as towards Asia, basically, you see.
Yeah, totally. So on that, you and I totally agree.
Yeah. Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Same here.
Yeah.
Bhaiya,
Thank you.
bye.
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 Bye-bye.